member states grilled Hungary over the ban of pride and its rule of law situation at a hearing in Brussels. 4 porn sites are the subject of a new investigation by the European Commission concerning child protection.
King Charles and Queen Camilla were in Canada on a visit widely seen as a show of support amid rising tensions with the United States.
EU member states have grilled Hungary over the gay pride ban and the rule of law situation at the Article 7 hearing in Brussels. Hungary has lately banned the gay pride and plans to put more pressure on foreign-funded NGOs and media.
Es kann einem niemand hier vorwerfen, dass wir keine Geduld gehabt hätten, sodass wir uns natürlich jetzt auch irgendwann einmal Gedanken machen müssen, wie wir hier in medias res gehen. Es gibt hier vorbereitete Erklärungen und ich kann nur sagen, die Geduld der Kolleginnen und Kollegen schwindet von Tag zu Tag.
The Article 7 process against Hungary started in 2018 because of rule of law worries, and ultimately the EU could strip Hungary's voting rights away at the end of the process.
We have had 7 years, 7 hearings, and I will be very clear today that this cannot just continue unless we see a completely new attitude from the Hungarian side today. I think it's time that we consider the next steps, because this is getting pointless in continuing these hearings.
Hungary said the accusations are baseless and politically motivated.
A lényeg nem változott, ez az eljárás mindig a politikai hisztériakeltés és a politikai nyomásgyakorlás eszköze volt. Nincs ez másként ma sem. A magyar kormány ettől függetlenül ebben az eljárásban nyílt, őszinte párbeszédre törekszik.
During the meeting, 20 EU countries demanded in a joint declaration that Hungary reverse the gay pride ban.
Pornhub, StripChat, XNXX and X videos are the subject of a new investigation by the European Commission. The 4 sites potentially violated the Digital Services Act, the EU's online safety rulebook, concerning child protection. The Commission says the investigation will focus on risks to minors, including the apparent lack of effective age verification systems. The sites are accused of failing to implement appropriate tools to stop children from accessing pornographic content. The Commission claims the platforms lack safeguards to protect users from potential harm, including risks to their mental and physical health. Under the DSA, major tech and content platforms are required to better protect users in the EU, especially children. The Commission says it will also work with national regulators to ensure smaller adult platforms follow the same rules. Ongoing European investigation into the way the Greek Payment Authority of Common Agricultural Policy aid schemes, or OPACOPAE, operates are changing how European funds are distributed to farmers in Greece. The group was under surveillance for a year, and the raid on its office last week was part of a wider investigation into illegal subsidies given to livestock farming.
Και η έκθεση που έγινε την περασμένη χρονιά ουσιαστικά διαπίστωνε μια σειρά προβλήματα τα οποία ανάγκασαν την Ευρωπαϊκή Επιτροπή, τη Γενική Διεύθυνση Γεωργίας, να θέσει υπό επιτήρηση τον οργανισμό για ένα περίπου χρόνο μέχρι την αποκατάσταση της λειτουργίας του με βάση τους κανόνες της Ευρωπαϊκής Επιτροπής. Ένας οργανισμός σαν τον ΟΠΑΚΕΠΕ δυστυχώς εντάχθηκε στην πάγια, αν το θέλετε, παθογένεια του πολιτικού μας συστήματος, το οποίο εντάσσει θεσμούς στο σύστημα των πελατειακών σχέσεων. Έτσι, μια ανοχή υπήρξε, η οποία οδήγησε τα πράγματα εδώ που τα οδήγησε.
The case will not only affect the mechanism for the payment of subsidies in Greece. It comes at a crucial moment during the restructuring process of the European Common Agricultural Policy and is likely to have long-term consequences.
Το αποτέλεσμα είναι ότι η Ελλάδα, ενώ στα χαρτιά θα έπρεπε να έχει μέσο όρο γεωργικών επιδοτήσεων 38 ευρώ το στρέμμα, βρίσκεται περίπου στα 58. Και δίνει την αίσθηση μιας χώρας που παίρνει πολύ μεγάλο ποσοστό επιδοτήσεων ανά έκταση, τη στιγμή που γίνεται σε όλη την υπόλοιπη Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση μια μεγάλη συζήτηση για το πώς θα εξομοιώσεις αυτού του είδους τις επιδοτήσεις.
The European Public Prosecutor's Office has signaled that it will continue its investigation into Opacopay, despite what it said were attacks and intimidation of its officials. For Opacopay, there are two scenarios. Its powers could be temporarily transferred to the European Commission or to the Greek Independent Authority of Public Revenue.
The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, a new aid distribution system in Gaza, opened its first hubs on Monday, according to the organization. It is taking over the handling of aid from other international organizations, such as the UN, which has criticized the new body as ineffective. The US-registered non-profit says it aims to distribute aid via hubs secured by private contractors. A letter released by the foundation, whose financial backers have not been revealed, says it aims to provide direct assistance by bypassing traditional aid models. On Monday, the organization's executive director, Jake Wood, resigned, citing concerns over its independence and impartiality. Aid groups have said the NGO violates humanitarian principles that prevent a warring party from overseeing humanitarian aid control. Israel has insisted it will not be directly involved, but would provide security and support for the plan. Netanyahu's government has recently found itself under increased pressure from allies following its 3-month aid blockade of Gaza.
The Syrian government and Kurdish authorities in the northeast of the country have agreed to evacuate Syrian citizens from the Al-Hol desert camp. Many of the camp's residents are wives and children of members of the Islamic State group, or those who've been displaced by IS. Human rights groups have long called for the reintegration of residents into their communities, pointing to poor living conditions and pervasive violence. The US, which helped facilitate the evacuation, has described the camp as a breeding ground for extremism. A previous mechanism had allowed Syrians in Al-Hol to return to their communities in Kurdish-controlled areas of the country, but this was not yet the case for the rest of Syria. The agreement on Syrian nationals comes as part of an attempt at closer cooperation between Kurdish authorities in the northeast and the government in Damascus. King Charles and Queen Camilla have traveled to Canada on a visit that's widely seen as a show of support amid rising tensions with the United States. The British King, who is also Canada's head of state, addressed Canada's Parliament to outline new Prime Minister Mark Carney's government priorities. Carney invited the King to give the so-called Speech of the Throne to underscore Canada's sovereignty, he said. It follows repeated suggestions from President Donald Trump that the US annex Canada. The Speech of the Throne, written by the Canadian government, is rarely delivered by the monarch. Queen Elizabeth did it twice in her 70-year reign, the last time in 1977. The King will return to the UK after the speech and a visit to Canada's National War Memorial.
Achieving full independence.
The EU is looking to move asylum processing and responsibilities beyond its borders. To this end, the Commission is working on 2 plans. Firstly, in April, it adopted a plan to designate so-called safe countries of origin to fast-track asylum applications from nationals of these countries so they could be returned more quickly. These include the EU candidate countries and 7 others deemed safe. Last week, it proposed changing another concept, the so-called safe third countries, with an eye on relocating the processing of asylum claims. This would allow EU countries to reject an application and then forcibly send people to a country with which they have no connection. The third countries have not been named, but should protect asylum seekers from persecution and serious harm, not deport asylum seekers, and provide a functioning asylum system. The idea is to manage asylum applications more effectively.
Well, the aim of both proposals is indeed to improve both the processing of asylum claims when they can be seen as manifestly unfounded for various reasons, and at the same time make sure that those who do not have a right to stay within the European Union but are already in the European Union are effectively returned. And so both share the aim of making the procedures, both asylum and return, more efficient, more effective, but of course also more implementable for the member states so that we can kind of bring back order and humanity to the common European asylum and migration policies.
The Commission has repeatedly stressed this will accelerate asylum processes and reduce pressure on asylum systems while respecting fundamental rights. However, critics of the proposals have argued that they risk having the opposite effect, stating they raise ethical and legal questions.
From a human rights perspective, the risks are already very clear. It's going to make it harder for people to access fair and full asylum procedures, even if they have very real protection needs. It increases the risk of refoulement, or people being sent back to danger, and their ability is restricted to challenge that decision from Europe, so they may be sent back to danger before their appeal has been heard. And lastly, it increases the risk of arbitrary automatic detention in third countries. You can already see with the EU's engagement with countries like Tunisia or Libya or Egypt that it has very little willingness or ability to monitor and enforce human rights in those partner countries.
These new proposals are not yet set in stone. They will now be voted on by the European Parliament and the Council for approval.